Well, hello everyone. I'd firstly like to say how nice it is to be here at another Scandza forum, despite what's going on outside. And I'd like to thank the wonderful Frody Midjord for inviting me along today, because it's so great to come out here and meet all you wonderful people. Now, I just want to say a few words about Frody before I begin, because after arranging a similar event in England, I've got to say, it is far more stressful arranging an event like this than you could possibly imagine. It really does push you to your limits. And Frody always looks so cool, he looks so calm, he looks so collected, despite the circus going on outside, people not being able to get in, all the stressful other things that happen. And when I say stressful other things, if any of you have arranged even a smaller event, the stressful other things also push you over the edge. But I think it's a sign of a true leader when under such heavy fire, under such circumstances that would cause normal men to break, he just looks so calm and carries this off so perfectly. So it really is an honor to know him. And I'd also like to thank him today because he said to me before I came here, he said, "Mark, I only want you to speak for 20 minutes. And I thought, that's really great, because I get to fly all the way to Denmark, somewhere I've never been, meet all these wonderful people, have dinner with everyone, and I only get to do, or only have to do, half the work that I'm usually expected to do." And when he asked me to speak about the issue of populism, it was something that I could have said an awful lot more about. And it's something I was very, very eager to speak about. Because in the last few years, the media have been talking about populism constantly, about this malevolent spectre of populism that is rising up and is casting a shadow across the Western world, across all European nations, and all nations, in fact, which would have been referred to as Western nations, America and Australia too. And the media have been very, very, very quick to decry populism as this great threat to democracy, as a threat to liberal values, as a threat to freedom of speech, and as a threat to almost to Western civilization itself. So I thought to myself, what actually is populism? What does populism mean? What is this threat that threatens us all, that threatens this wonderful democracy we live in? Well, I defaulted to something that isn't really our friend, to Google. And I asked, what is populism? And the answer that was spat back at me was, a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups. And that made me think, wow, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, when you read that, you would think populism would be a good thing, and that the populists, the people leading this populist revolution, the people who are actually standing up for ordinary folk, that they would be the heroes, that they would be the good guys. But no, according to the press, according to the media, according to the establishment, we're in fact, or the populists should I say, are the greatest evil of our time. The populists are in fact the bad guys. They're the ones who are threatening everything we hold dear. Now, that's all a little bit strange, because we're repeatedly told that we live in a democracy. And that's the key word, because a democracy is a system where the ordinary people are meant to have representation in Parliament. And the key word there, the word that should be underlined in that sentence, is representation. Now, democracy is not meant to be a system where you elect someone to tell you what to do. You don't go to the polling booth to elect someone to tell you how to think, to tell you how to feel. You're not going to the polling station to elect someone who is meant to impose their will upon you. You're going there, you're going to the polling station, you're marking your little cross in the box and you're popping it in the box because you're meant to be voting for someone to represent you in Parliament. And that makes sense because Parliament is a huge building. It's a really, really large building. But it's not that big. It's not big enough to hold us all. It's not big enough so that we can all just jump into our car, travel down to Parliament and have our say when something is happening. Because if we did that, there'd be utter chaos. And there's far more people in Britain who want to have a say in how the nation is run than could ever fit into a single building. So they've broken Britain down into constituencies. And in those constituencies, the people, the constituents, elect someone to represent their views in Parliament. So each individual constituency sends one person to represent the ordinary people, so that the ordinary people get to have their voices heard. And that really makes sense, because it saves everyone in that constituency having to gang together, get in buses, get in their cars, go down to London to have a say. It all makes perfect sense when you think about it. But then you look at it and think, well, parliamentary democracy, this system of electing one person to represent the ordinary people, by its very nature, it seems to be exactly the same as the system of populism that the media hates. Ordinary people are voting for candidates, and the winner of the popular vote, they get elected, they go to Parliament, and then they put forward the opinions of the ordinary people. That does sound like a good system. But then you think, isn't it rather odd that the press, the media, the establishment, they're all decrying populism. They're all attacking the idea of ordinary people being represented in Parliament. They're attacking the idea that ordinary people should have their voices heard. But at the same time, as attacking populism, they're all saying democracy is sacred. Democracy is central to our way of life. They tell us the importance of this wonderful democracy and how our societies stand above all other societies in the world because of that parliamentary democracy. And you're thinking to yourself, none of this adds up. You've got democracy on one hand, you've got populism on the other. And the media are saying populism's bad, yet democracy is good, and that they're in fact opposites. But it goes further than that. They're not just opposites. The politicians, the press, the media, they say populism is actually a threat to democracy. One threatens the existence of the other. And that populism, because it threatens this wonderful democracy, it needs to be curtailed. It needs to be stopped. We need to stop these evil populists from representing the ordinary people. Because otherwise, our freedom, our liberty, our entire way of life will disappear as we know it. And at this point, I'm sure everyone in the room has got the message. It's all getting quite clear that the media attack populism, yet they praise democracy, because democracy in its current form and populism, two things that should be the same, are in fact very different forms of governance. One represents the people, the other ignores the people. And democracy, the system which is meant to be a system of representation of ordinary people, is now no longer anything to do with representing ordinary people. So I thought we should probably dig a little deeper into the terms that liberals use, the terms that are used by the establishment, the media and the press, and we should look at those terms and we should translate them. We should provide a translation service from liberal speak into English. So we're going to look at 3 words or 3 terms: democracy, the popular vote, and populism. And we'll start with the term democracy. Now, we all know what democracy should be. We know what it should mean. We know it should be about representation. But what does it mean when that word is being spoken by a liberal? When you hear a liberal say democracy, let's translate that liberal speak into English. Because when a liberal says democracy, you're not talking about representation. You're talking about a system of voting for an out-of-touch gun for hire. And that's a very nice way of putting it, because when you say gun for hire, you think of some kind of Western hero in the Wild West doing something heroic. So let's not call them guns for hire. Let's call them prostitutes. You vote for a prostitute, and crucially, you don't vote for the prostitute that you like the best. You vote for the prostitute you dislike the least. And that's a very important point. That's a crucial part of this process, because few people still vote for a candidate that they really like. Instead, they look at all the candidates and say, I really, really don't like him. And I don't like him either. But I really hate him. So I'm going to vote for him who I dislike because it's better than him over there who I really hate. And that's what happens in England. You know, you hear people saying all the time, oh, the Tories and Labour, I can't stand any of them. So who did you vote for? Oh, I voted Tory. Why? Because I really hate Labour. And then on the other hand, you just, I'm not a fan of any of those people in Parliament. Well, did you vote? Yeah, I voted Labour. Because my dad said, never vote Tories, because they'll be far worse than Labour. And you're stuck in this system of voting for people that you don't really want to vote for. So you start by voting for the candidate or prostitute that you dislike the least. And then that prostitute goes to Parliament on your behalf. But they don't represent you. But instead, they prostitute themselves to big business, to special interest groups, to internationalist causes. And when in Parliament, that prostitute sits there and basically implements whatever they want, what benefits them personally, what benefits their paymasters, and they do all of this regardless of what their constituents want. In fact, once elected, most of these prostitutes actually do the very opposite of what the people who voted for them, the people who voted for that prostitute to represent them, they do the opposite of what those people want. So in short, what do liberals really mean when they say democracy? Well, this is the translation. Democracy, in liberal speak, is a system of electing the prostitute that you dislike the least, so he or she can then represent the interests of someone else, often to your detriment. Now we'll move to definition 2, the popular vote. Now everyone knows what the popular vote is meant to mean. It's meant to mean the total number of votes cast. It's meant to mean all the people who go to the polling station to put their little mark, little cross in the box, and pop their little piece of paper in the ballot box. Now, again, this is very strange, because the vast majority of people who go to the polling station to put their little piece of paper in the box, who are those people? Well, you've probably guessed it. They're actually ordinary people. The vast majority of people who vote are ordinary people. But this isn't populism, this is the popular vote. So what's the difference between ordinary people voting for something, and that being populism, and the popular vote? Well, in the liberal system of democracy, the people are, of course, not voting for what they actually want. They are presented with a narrow selection of candidates, a narrow selection of options, which are all pre-approved and pre-chosen by the establishment. So you can clearly see that it's only populism when people get to vote for someone who they actually like, who they actually want to vote for, who actually stands up for the ordinary people. In liberal speak, the vote is only popular and democratic when the person elected doesn't represent the people who elected them. You see, popular, and popular is always seen as good. When the press talk about popular, it's always good. But it's only good, it's only right, it's only the correct thing when popular chooses the right candidate. When it chooses the candidate that the establishment, the internationalists, and the media want. So, when a voter elects a candidate who wants open borders, who wants to flood us with low IQ migrants, who wants to put GDP on a pedestal, who wants us all being attacked in the street by people who shouldn't belong here, well, when somebody votes them in, that's popular. Democracy's triumphed. We all give ourselves a pat on the back. We cheer. What a wonderful system we live in. And the media and the press, they all congratulate themselves. They congratulate the system. And we are told by these people that we should all honour that result. And whatever the prostitute who's been elected wants to do, we should adhere to that with slavish devotion, because the popular vote has triumphed, and that is the will of the people. So if the current ruling prostitute lets in those millions of low IQ migrants who create chaos, we have to sit there clapping like seals. We have to applaud it. We have to say it was the right thing. Because the prostitute who's doing this, or the group of prostitutes, they won the popular vote. So those low IQ migrants flooding our towns and cities, well, that's what we wanted, isn't it? That's the will of the people. But if one of these populists, if one of these awful threats to democracy ends up on the ballot paper, and the people do the unthinkable and elect them into parliament or a regional body, and they elect somebody that really represents them, if the ordinary people elect someone who actually represents them, democracy has failed. Democracy has failed us all, and the vote must be recast, or the candidate must be impeached, or we must have a second run at the referendum. And we'll keep having a second run. In fact, we'll have a third run. We'll have a do-over, and we'll do it again and again and again, until the establishment and the media and the press get the result they want. Because the result is only smiled upon when the people make the right choice, when they elect the right candidate. When people elect the right candidate, it's popular. When people elect the wrong candidate, it's populism. Do you see what they're doing there? Popular is good. Populism is evil. And that takes us on to the third and final definition, which is, of course, populism. Populism is the final piece of this puzzle. It's the final part of this interesting use of language. In reality, populism, the will of the people. It's what ordinary people want. And it means true representation of people at grassroots level. It means talking about issues that ordinary people care about. It means saying, we don't want loads of low IQ foreigners flooding our lands and taking our jobs and raping young girls in Rotherham and Telford. It means talking about these grooming gangs and saying, why aren't the police doing something about it? It means saying the EU hasn't been a good thing for our people. It means talking about all of the issues that we speak about. And the issues we speak about are the same issues that normal people in their homes on a daily basis talk about when they know they're not being listened to by people who might report them to bodies and groups that want to shut up the ordinary people. And ultimately, it means electing candidates who are free, who do not serve special interest groups, who do not serve minorities, who do not serve shady financiers or media hacks. It means electing people who are free of the strings that are attached to the claws of the internationalist clique. You see, once the riddle of democracy, the popular vote and populism is all translated, once the liberals speak is put into plain English, it becomes very, very clear as to why the media and the press and the establishment hate populism so much and why they're so viciously opposed to it. They hate populism because populism is actually true democracy. It's the will of the people. And ultimately, the media, the establishment, and the internationalists do not want the will of the people to be expressed, because the will of the people is a threat to their power. And from the very beginning of this speech, I've kept using one phrase, and that's ordinary people. And a theme has emerged throughout this short speech. A theme of the media and of the establishment wishing to take away the voice of the ordinary people and ensuring that ordinary people don't have a say, that the wishes of ordinary people are not represented. And why is that? Well, quite simply, those who run the media, the internationalist clique pulling the strings of the prostitute politicians, they are not ordinary people. In fact, they hate the ordinary people. And they do not want the ordinary people to take their destiny into their own hands. Because what is good for the ordinary people is not good for those who run the media, for those within the establishment, for the internationalists. And the opposite is true. What is good for the internationalists, what is good for those in the media, what is good for those in the establishment is not good for ordinary people. But I still haven't got to the bottom of this. I keep saying ordinary people. But who are the ordinary people? Who are the people having their will suppressed? The ones the internationalists want to control and deny a voice. Who are the people being disenfranchised? The people being turned into second-class citizens? Well, those people are the indigenous people of Europe. They are the people of European descent. They are us. And the establishment, the media and the internationalists, they want to deny us a voice because they hate us. They hate those of European descent. And what's more, they want us gone. They want us bred out of existence and replaced in our own ancestral homelands. Thus, the internationalists have fashioned a system to do away with us. And they call it democracy. And they tell us we have a choice. But every time we choose something they don't like, every time we vote outside of their narrow list of options, they go berserk and they decry our choice as populism. Because their system of democracy doesn't present real choice. Because it was never intended to present real choice. The so-called liberal democracy presents the illusion of choice. Because the key to all this is when you believe you are free, when you have the illusion of choice, you are much less likely to rebel. You're less likely to try to break free from the cage that has been built around you. And wouldn't that be the greatest kind of bondage, the greatest kind of cage? A prison where the inmates believed that they were in fact free and had a choice. And that's the truth of the matter. The democracy that is promoted by the media and the establishment is just another tool of control. Just another way of ensuring that those of European descent will never be free. But amongst all the liberal doublespeak, amongst all the babble, there is one truth. Our enemies do speak
one truth. And that is that populism threatens their illusion of democracy. Populism threatens to wipe away their corrupt system and do away with the political prostitutes that rule over us. Populism threatens to set our people free. Because populism is the will of the people, not the will of the internationalist clique. And that begs a question. What is the will of the people? What is the will of our people? What do those of European descent want? What do we want so much that the internationalists fear and hate so much? Well, we want the one thing that they will never accept. We want to exist. We want to prosper. We want to celebrate our culture, our traditions, and our heritage. We want a future in our ancestral homelands. And we want a future for our children. And the reason the internationalists and their puppet politicians are making so much noise about populism is because they are scared. They're scared that our people have started to stir, that our people are starting to speak up. And maybe you can hear it. It may have started as a whisper, as a murmur amongst the crowds. But the voice of the European people is getting louder. And more of us are daring to stand up. More and more of us are ready to be heard, ready to stand up against the establishment and dare to speak the words that are becoming the act of defiance of our age. And the popular will of our people, the act of defiance, the will of the European people, will soon be heard by all of these parasites and traitors. Our people will come together. They will rise up as one. Not to ask for the scraps from the table. Not to beg for mercy. But to take back our destiny and to state clearly and unequivocally that we will not be replaced. Thank you.